Morning. So it's a rainy Thursday. It's going to be a good day for a read aloud. We're still reading Wishtree. We left off with the woman that owns the Wishtree and the two houses that Samar and Stephen live in. She has set up the schedule for the Wishtree to be cut down after the wishing day, which happens to be today. So I want to go over a few things before we get started with the read aloud. We've talked about this before. We've talked about point of view before, but I just wanted to kind of go back to it. Point of view is referring to who tells the story. So we've talked about two different types of point of view. We've talked about first person point of view and third person point of view. So we're thinking about third person point of view first. And as you're reading your stories, I want you to think about this too. And as we're reading our story today too. So lots of stories have third person point of view, and that means that the narrator or the person telling the story is not a character in the story. So we'll often have pronouns, which are words that stand for people's names or characters' names in the story, that would be he, she, they, her, his, and their. And those just tell us that it's an outside character, not a character in the story, outside narrator. The story Wishtree is written in first person point of view. And that means that the narrator is part of the story. When we read this story, when we listen to it, Red is the narrator. Red is the person, the tree, telling the story. And we often hear the pronouns I, me, my, we, us, and our when we think of the first person point of view. So look for those in your stories. We also are going to be thinking about theme. And as you can see on here, the theme is the message or the lesson the author wants you to take away after reading the story. Now, you have to think about the theme as what is the message or messages that the author is giving you throughout the story. It's not just one part of the story. And there can be more than one theme in one story. For example, in Wishtree, there's more than one theme. So let's take a look at some of the themes that we have in Wishtree. We've got courage, on the page here, courage, dreams, acceptance of others, being fearful of something, peace, never giving up, equality, hope, kindness, friendship, just being yourself, overcoming differences that there might be, honesty, love, home, jealousy, the idea of working hard for something, doing the right thing. So those are a lot of themes that we find in stories, but keep in mind it doesn't have to just be one word. It can be the idea of never giving up. So it's a lesson, it's a moral, it's a message from the author. It can often be something that we learn. And when we're reading, we need to think about what did the characters learn? How did they grow and change? Why did the characters act the way that they did? So for example, when we're reading Wishtree today, we need to also think about Francesca. And right now I'm like, oh my goodness, she's kind of a villain in the story because she wants to cut Red down. But what's her motivation behind that? Why is she acting that way? What's her reasoning? And does her reasoning make sense to you? So if we think back on this, we remember her talking about the sidewalks cracking, how Red's roots are affecting the sidewalks, they're affecting the plumbing, and not just Francesca's house, but across the street at Stephen and Samar's houses also. She doesn't like the messiness of Wish Day and the idea of having to clean that up every year after May 1st. And she seems like a character that's really self-centered, but you also have to think about Does she have a reason for the way that she feels about these things? When we read today, you're going to find that her perspective on the wish tree doesn't really change a whole lot. And she notices some things about Samar that are going to come up in the story. So I don't want to give too much away, but all right. So here we go. We are on chapter 44. All right. Early that evening, Francesca stopped by the blue and green houses, my houses. One with a black door, one with a brown door. One with a yellow mailbox, and one with a red mailbox. She knocked on each door. She explained her plans for me. Both sets of parents said they understood. They would be sorry to see me go, but it would be a relief to see an end to wishing day, wouldn't it? And my absence would mean more sunlight in their living rooms and fewer acorns underfoot. Okay. At least let me make a deposit on the parents, Bongo grumbled. More sunlight. The nerve. How about less oxygen, people? Less beauty. Thank you for defending me, Bongo, I said, but no depositing. Samar and Stephen were not so understanding. They ran after Francesca as she crossed the lawn. Samar pulled on her sweater. You have to listen to us, Samar said. You can't cut down the tree. I can't? Francesca inquired. And why is that, dear? Because, Stephen said, panting, it's alive. Oh, well, I'm quite aware of that, Francesca said. It's a common trait of trees. She paused, peering down at the ribbon around Samar's neck. Why, I know that key, she said. I recognize that ribbon. A crow gave it to me. No kidding. Smart birds, crows. Samar slipped the ribbon over her head and handed the key to Francesca. Oh, I don't want that old thing, she said, giving it back. You can keep it. It just made me remember. Oh, it's not important. It opens a diary. My great-great-grandmother Maeve kept a journal after she moved here. So that's what it's for, Samar said. Where is it? Stephen said. The journal. Attic, maybe. Or no, it's probably in the shed behind Samar's house. Got a lot of old family stuff stashed away in there. She gave a wry smile. Unless it all floated away. Backyard's pretty wet right now. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons it's time for this tree to say goodbye. Samar wiped away tears. You don't understand. This tree, it's almost like it's human. That's sweet. Francesca patted Samar's head. But, honey, it's just a tree. She squared her shoulders. Now, I must go feed Lewis and Clark. I can hear them complaining from all the way over here, and I've got a busy day ahead of me tomorrow. As she moved to leave, Stephen stepped in front of her. Before you go, he said, his voice firm, just listen. He turned to me. Say something, he instructed. Please, Tree, Samar pleaded. I kept silent. What more was there to say? Francesca looked from Stephen to Samar and back again. Children, she said, perhaps those video games you like to play have addled your brains. Talk, Tree, Stephen said. Silence. It can talk, Samar told Francesca. Real words. It told us the story about Maeve. Francesca, for just a moment, hesitated. She looked at me. You mean metaphorically, of course. The tree seemed to talk to you. The leaves whispered and so on. It told us about the hollow and the baby. Francesca blinked. The baby? Yes, Samar said. The abandoned baby? Again, Francesca paused. Of course I've told that family story before. You've probably heard it from a neighbor. Stephen shook his head. We heard it from the tree. Oh my, said Francesca. She waved a hand in front of her face. You're wearing me out, you two. I'm so very glad my parenting days are behind me. Listen here. You get a good night's sleep, understand? Or maybe some counseling?" As quickly as she could, Francesca made her way across the lawn, her shoes caked with mud. "Francesca," Stephen called. "It's just a tree, dears. Repeat after me. It's a tree." "I was wondering if we could look for that diary." She glanced over her shoulder. "Maeve's journal? Be my guest, if it's not underwater by now." She held up her palms. "Just no more tree craziness. You hear?" When Francesca was back in her house, Stephen and Samar looked at me accusingly. "Why didn't you talk?" Samar demanded. "Because it was foolish. Because I wasn't supposed to. Because." Looking defeated, Stephen and Samar trudged away. They hadn't gone far when Samar paused and turned to Stephen. "Something happened today," she said. "People at school were being weird, talking about me, whispering, passing notes even." She narrowed her eyes. "You didn't tell anyone, did you? About what happened last night?" "Of course not." "Oh, then I wonder what's going on." "You're probably imagining things." "I don't think so. I mean, I'm used to people talking about me, being mean, but this was different." "Things aren't always what they seem," Stephen smiled sympathetically. "Come on, let's go check out that shed." I watched the two of them head toward Samar's backyard. They were talking, laughing, becoming friends perhaps. Maybe I hadn't been so foolish to talk after all. Chapter 45. Trees don't sleep, not like people do, or animals. But we do rest. Unfortunately, the night rest eluded me. I was filled with questions about the coming day, of course. But most of all, I didn't want to miss a moment of what little life I had left. I wanted to drink in the stars. I wanted to feel the fuzzy wings of the owlets. I wanted to stretch my roots just a tiny bit farther before the night was through. I wanted to indulge in some quiet contemplation about life and love and what it all meant. I wanted to philosophize. "I've been thinking," I said to Bongo. "There's no point in my worrying about tomorrow. It will come soon enough." "Red," said Bongo. "Too much, wise old tree?" Bongo paused. He looked at me for a long time. "Never," she said. "Never, ever too much, wise old tree." Bongo settled onto home plate. The world was quiet and calm. "Want to hear a tree joke?" I asked. "Is it funny?" "Probably not," I admitted. "Then probably no." "What's a tree's least favorite month?" "I don't know. What month?" "September." I paused. "Because, you see—" "Red," Bongo interrupted. "As always, no need to explain." We didn't speak much after that. Turned out I didn't need to talk about life and love and what it all meant. It was enough to watch the sky freckled with stars, to smell the sweet wet earth, to listen to the beating hearts of the little ones I could keep safe, at least for one more night. Chapter 46. Saturday morning dawned clean and cool. Even before the sun made itself known, the animals and owls departed the safety of my limbs. Each family had found a new home, all nearby trees on the same block. The skunks were going to remain under the porch. It made me happy to know that everyone would be staying in the neighborhood. One by one, they nuzzled me, whispered their goodbyes. Oh boy, my dogs are fighting. 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. The dogs were having some fun downstairs here. Where did we leave off? One by one, they nuzzled me, whispering their goodbyes. The babies sniffled, especially Harold and Rose Petal and Flashlight. The parents tried to put on brave faces, but their trembling voices gave them away. It was awful. but I was glad to get it over with. I've always hated goodbyes. Bongo, for her part, insisted on staying with me to the bitter end. I knew better than to argue with her. By 6 in the morning, Stephen and Samar were sitting together on Samar's porch. By 7, Sandy and Max had arrived. They parked across the street and sat in their cruiser, sipping coffee and eating donuts. By 8, 3 local reporters had arrived, armed with microphones and fancy equipment. They took video of the word leave. They talked about its meaning and how it had changed the feel of the neighborhood. They also talked about me, the doomed Wishtree. I didn't like the word doomed, but I had to admit it was accurate reporting. Francesca came at 8:30 carrying a cup of tea and dragging a small wooden ladder, the one she put out every year for the wishmakers. She went back home and promptly returned with Lewis and Clark on their kitty leashes. They were not cooperative. And then the wishes began. A toddler on her dad's shoulders reaching high. An old woman, aided by 2 young girls. Neighbor after neighbor, many of whom I've seen pass by over the years. Wish after wish after wish. Some on scraps of colorful fabric, many on paper tied with a ribbon or a string, a few socks, 2 t-shirts, and 1 pair of underwear. At first, people came in small groups or one by one, but then something changed. The trickle of people became a deluge. Many of them were kids from the elementary school, and there were parents and teachers too. 12 kids, 50, 100 and more. Every person seemed to be carrying an index card. Each card had a hole punched in it, with a piece of string looped through the hole. Oh, you know what I was just thinking? Remember when Samar said that she felt like people were talking about her at school? I wonder if they made a plan together to bring wishes to the wish tree. Every person seemed to be carrying an index card. Each card had a hole punched in it with a piece of string looped through the hole. Stephen high-fived many of them, hugged his principal, waved to his teacher. Samar just sat on the steps with her parents, a quizzical expression on her face. One by one, the children tied their wishes to me. The principal and assistant principal and janitor and teachers all helped. My boughs had never been more laden. My heart had never been more hopeful. Because as each child, as each neighbor, as each stranger placed a wish upon me, they looked at Samar and her parents and said the same thing. Stay. So right now, this hasn't been a theme through the whole story, but a theme that I notice that right now is compassion and caring about Samar and her family, and people making an effort to make them feel welcome and make them want to stay instead of leave. So, something to think about for tomorrow. What's going to happen with the wish tree? What's going to happen with Samar's family after seeing everyone and hearing everyone tell them to stay? And do all of those wishes say stay on them? We'll have to wait and see. Tune in tomorrow. Bye, guys.